Hello and welcome to our digital ethno-narrative on Ethiopia. Before going into our conducted interview, we will be sharing background information and statistics about Ethiopia. West of Somalia, nearly 7,717 miles away from Minneapolis, Minnesota, lies the country of Ethiopia. The one-party state is a federal parliamentary republic nearly 2 times the size of Texas and holds 105 million people. From that population are numerous ethnic and racial groups including the Oromo, Amhara, Somali, and Tigray. Ethiopia is a religious country and its residents are 43.5% Ethiopian Orthodox, 33% Muslim, 33% Protestant, and 5% other. The literacy rate is 49%, and of that 57% are males and 41% are females. Education up until the early 1900s was regulated by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The income per capita is $660. The birth rate is said to be 4.8 children to 1 woman, but in recent years has been difficult to pinpoint. Due to the lack of sex education and medical resources, the birth rate is slowly increasing, but Ethiopian government is working to lower it. When it comes to family systems in Ethiopia, the head of the household is usually the oldest male. The women are in charge of household work and raising children. It is common for a home to hold about 3 to 4 generations because culturally elders are to be cared for directly by their families. Nursing homes do exist, but they are seen as abandonment from the family. The population of elders is expected to go up by 55% in the year 2050, along with poverty, homelessness, and hunger in the elderly. Ethiopian families generally have authoritarian-style parenting that utilizes fear as a method of control. Parents are superior to their children and are strict, especially towards their daughters. Dating freely for both sons and daughters is rare because marriages are known to be arranged. The legal age to get married is 18, but most families disregard this, with 2 out of 5 girls being wed before the age of 18 and 1 out of 5 before the age of 15. It is not uncommon to see a mediator used to negotiate terms, conditions, and preparations for both families. The bride's dowry is paid in either money or livestock and cattle. Weddings are traditionally large, long, and filled with dance and music. The honeymoon lasts anywhere from 1 week to 3 months. There is a rule that the bride cannot go outside until the sun sets, and both the bride and the groom must be accompanied by the best man and woman at all times. After the honeymoon, the married couple stays with the bride's family for a short time before starting a family of their own. Traditionally, men are to be the moneymakers that deal with finances, but with the current state of Ethiopia's economy and the social standards changing, gender roles are becoming less relevant because all parties must contribute financially. Ethiopia saw the fall of communism in 1991 and is a key ally to the United States in helping combat terrorism. It is one of the fastest growing economies in Africa and comes in second for population. However, it is extremely ethnically fractured, where civil conflicts arise along with tensions regarding the government's attitude being uninclusive and repressive. The previous prime minister recently resigned in February of 2018. Many leaders set out to change and reform Ethiopia's government, and that person right now is the unofficial acting Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed. We will now show you the conducted interview with a young Ethiopian-American woman to provide more information.
My name is Freah. I am also a sophomore, and I'm majoring in biology. I'm Ethiopian, so I'd say my culture revolves a lot around religion because it's like a super historically religious country, and there are a lot of sites and like churches and everything that have a lot of like historic relevance. So I think that's one really important thing, and also it's just like our culture revolves around spending time with your family, and that's another really big thing that I think kind of represents my culture. How do I answer that? What does it mean to be Ethiopian? I actually don't know how to answer that. What does it mean to be Ethiopian? I guess, like, knowing the culture, and you don't have to know the language or like be super immersed, but like having a connection with the people there, I think is something that's really important being Ethiopian. Hopefully that answers the question. I think like our culture is a huge part of our lives because like in our house we eat Ethiopian food all the time. My mom plays music all the time, and I think that like our family is pretty close, and I think that has to do with the culture just because like I said before, a lot of the time in Ethiopia, like if you go to Ethiopia, you'll be at like other people would be at their family's house or like with their neighbors or whatever, just like having a good time, and that's something that I think translated here as well. I think it changes some things just because we don't always have access to the same things like time. A lot of our time is taken up by like, you know, work or other things that we are involved in. For us, it'd be school, obviously. But because there's a pretty big community here, like there are a lot of Ethiopian immigrants that came to Minneapolis, so with that came like a lot of the culture and a lot of the same practices, just not always in the same way. Like it's tweaked a bit to work in this context, but it has a lot of the same like base values and, you know, practices. Family traditions. I'd say a lot of it is cultural, and like we celebrate a lot of the same holidays that they do over there in Ethiopia. And family traditions, I don't know, my mom, like I said before, she always plays music. And yeah, other than that, I think it's just holidays. So yeah. Cultural traditions, well, like I said, Christmas, Easter, big ones. Non-religious, there's our New Year, which is actually on September 11th, that we celebrate, and there's like fun, like fun thing that they do is like there's always groups of girls that go around and like knock on people's doors and sing and whatever, and like for us here, it's a way to like fundraise money for different causes. For us, probably we need to pay off our mortgage for church, so that's one thing that we do it for. Another holiday, I don't know how it translates, but it's called Buhe, and basically it's the same kind of tradition, but guys go around and they sing and dance for money. And I was actually in Ethiopia this summer during that holiday, and we got to see how that like happened actually in Ethiopia versus how I've seen it here, and it's super different. Like there it's at night and they like light up a fire and guys like circle around it and they sing and they dance, and like they go in if you give them a lot of money. But here they just like go around and, you know, have a like, it's more lighthearted here, it's not as intense. And obviously during the daytime because people have to go home and like go to work in the morning, stuff like that. So that's a really fun thing. I guess kind of went off on a tangent, but well, earlier I can't really recall because I haven't really been able to like compare the two, but I guess just celebrating those, like those have always been constants in my life, so that's one thing that kind of really strengthened the sense of like cultural pride and all that stuff. So yeah. See, well, if you take Christmas or something, or like Easter or something like that, for example, other cultures and like religions and stuff seem to have kind of a similar outlook on it, because like there's a night mass that people go to, but like for we like church starts at like 4 and it goes all the way until like 3 a.m. and it's like a bunch of like religious songs and like don't know how to describe it, but it's just a bunch of practices that go on that take up that entire time. And so that's like similarities and differences that I think are important. A lot of the holidays themselves have translated from Ethiopia to here, but I think some of the practices have had to change just because of like a shortage of time, or we don't have the same kind of resources or like locations that you can spend or celebrate the holidays in. So I think that like the main part has stayed the same, but like the way that you celebrate has changed slightly. I'd say like obviously my immediate family, My dad's brother, so my uncle and his wife also live here. I have two other families that are like not really that related to us by blood, but we grew up together, and our parents have known each other for a super long time. So I consider like two or three other families as part of our family as well. Well, my family, like my parents have both lived in Ethiopia, and then they were in Kenya for a while. And then when we moved to the US, they were in Washington, D.C. for a little bit. And then we moved to South Dakota for like 4 years. And then when I was 4, we moved to Minnesota. And then we lived in Hopkins for a little bit, and then we moved to Crystal, and that's where we live now. Yeah, I'd say we're a pretty close family, especially like the immediate family. We spend a lot of time together. Obviously, we share a house, so we kind of have to. But like me and my brothers, we don't talk that much, but you know, we obviously love each other. And my mom, since I've gone to college, especially, she calls me almost every night. And sometimes when we go a few days without like talking on the phone, my mom gets mad at me and be like, "You really don't care, do you? So you don't want to call me? I always have to call you." And I'm like, I'm sorry. But yeah, we're pretty close. I talk to my dad pretty often too in college, so that's another thing. Oh, they love having me home for the weekends. They get they always question why I don't go home on weekends if I don't. So yeah. Well, as a family, I guess we try to have dinner together a lot. Usually it's just like me and my brothers have dinner together if we're all home, or if we can, everyone eats together, but sometimes like my mom comes home late or my dad does. And then if there are any cultural or religious events happening, we all go together always. So yeah, that's another thing. Well, when my parents first came here, I was with them, but I was only 6 months old. But when we first arrived in DC, my parents like lived there a little bit and worked just, I guess, to earn some money, obviously. And I think they wanted to move somewhere cheap that wasn't like super expensive to live. So they moved to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Very small town. Well, not small town. It's kind of big, but it's like, I don't know. I think it's pretty small, especially compared to Minneapolis. But we lived there for a while, and then when I was 4 or 5, I think, we moved to Hopkins because actually one of the like people that we considered like really close friends or family lived over there. And before we had our own place, we actually lived with them for a while, like in their house for a couple months until we moved into our own apartment. So yeah, I think it was just to be closer to people that we knew, because there were a lot of people that we actually knew that already lived here. So yeah. Well, extended family other than the people that I mentioned that live here all live in Ethiopia. So we don't talk that often. Like I think my parents call them every so often, I guess. But I personally don't speak to my grandparents that much. My mom's mom came here and lived with us for a few years, but she ended up moving back because I think she was sick and she just liked it better in Ethiopia. Like, who wants to come from like warm year round to the winter here? So yeah, I don't really talk to people in my extended family that often. Well, I think it's just like normal to how it is in like other cultures as well. Like the women are expected to cook and clean and stuff like that. The guys do other work. Like if my dad needs to mow the lawn, he'll have my brother help him. Or if he needs to do any type of like work that like involves yard work or like building stuff, he'll ask my brother to help him if he needs help. But yeah. Well, gender roles. Yeah, actually, my mom was talking about how when she was little, or like, I guess not that little, she was like school age, and she'd want to go to school, and her mom like didn't want her to go to school because she wanted her to like help around the house. So she'd like get mad at her for going to school. And then my mom's brother, like her older brother, I think who was a teacher, was the one that like had her, like who encouraged her to stay in school. And she'd like, I think she'd like hide away and do her homework sometimes because like her family just didn't want her to do that, which I thought was really interesting. I remember having to write something about that, and she was telling me, and I was like, oh, that's crazy. Yeah. I think, yes and no, because in Ethiopia, like, a girl my age would be able to cook every single dish that exists, and I can't cook anything. Vanessa knows, she's my roommate. I can make basic things, but like anything that's more complicated than like pasta or something like that, I struggle with. So that's that's why it's no. But like also yes, because I do end up helping my mom in the kitchen, and like my brothers do help with things that men are supposed to do. And then also no, because if the house needs to be cleaned, all of us are cleaning. It's not just like me and my brothers get to sit around. Like all of us get yelled at pretty much if it needs to be cleaned and it's not. So, yeah. Well, dating was like not even thought about. Like that was like nothing to consider. Like it just didn't happen. For school, you know, you're expected to do well in school. Anytime you got a grade that wasn't like an A, you know, they'd be like, why? Why not? Friendships, I mean, there weren't that many rules about like making friends, but if you wanted to go to your friend's house, that was a struggle because they'd have to answer, like they'd ask you a ton of questions, and if you wanted to go to like a birthday party, that might, like, there would be some traction there in being able to go, especially if it's a sleepover. Sleepovers didn't happen unless it was with family. I think that's it. Yeah. Some values. I think respect is a huge thing, especially for your elders, is a huge thing. That is in our culture. Like for us, sometimes it can be rude to be like look people in the eye because it's a sign of disrespect. But here, if you don't look people in the eye, you know, that can be like, oh, are you hiding something, or like you're not confident or something like that. But I think respect is one big thing. Because of the religion aspect, there's a lot of like religious values, like going to church, you know, not lying, stuff like that. And yeah, definitely. I wonder if my kids don't know respect when they grow up, I'm going to be angry because some kids nowadays, they're so rude. I'm like, no, not my children. But yeah, respect. And like, I guess, you know, honesty, the typical things that make you a good person, something that I'd like to pass down to my children. Cultural things, I guess, like the holidays. I mean, we do still have a pretty big community here, so going to different events and spending time with people that have the same culture as you, I think is really important, something that I'd like to continue in the future when kids come around, whenever that is. So, I'd say my family is, okay, what's the name? It's Ethiopian-Orthodox Church. So it's like a super, like, by the book, strict religion. And that's the religion that's like the majority in Ethiopia. It's that and Islam that are huge in Ethiopia. So, yeah. They don't actually talk about life that often, but I think, like, my mom, when we last time over the summer we went to Ethiopia, and my mom took us to where she grew up, and my dad did too. And like my mom's especially was like in a rural area. It was like a huge farm, and she was showing like everyone's land that they had in a huge field, and I was like, oh, that's crazy. So like they lived in a rural area with like a bunch of farm animals and like land that they had to tend to, which I thought was really interesting. And then my dad lived in like a smaller town that wasn't really rural, but also it wasn't like a city. So I think he just kind of, I think they had animals too, just like not land that they like had to tend to. But yeah, I think What was the question? Is it different?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say it's a lot different than it is here. I think it made them want to like hold on to the culture as much as possible, just because it wasn't always around them all the time. You know what I mean? And it kind of just encouraged them to actually be more active and participate in things, just so we don't lose the culture. Yeah.
Mm.
I think it's really, like, just because it's very different there than it is here. Like, you know, here I'm used to being connected to Wi-Fi all the time, and there you'd have to, like, scavenge Wi-Fi spots just to, like, look at an email or something. And there was a lot less structure there than there is here, so you could, like, if you had things to do, you could do them whenever you needed to. Instead of like, oh, I have to go from, like, to work from 9 to 5, or I have class starting at 9 a.m. every day and stuff like that. It's a lot less structured, and yeah, you spend a lot more time with other people, like I said before. And I think, yeah, that's it for me at least.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time. We appreciate your willingness to share and to hear your story, so thank you for being here.
Oh, no problem. Thank you guys for spending time with me and getting to know me.